Welcome to Kingdom Shakers on Life 97.5 FM, where we chat with individuals anywhere around the world using their gifts to fulfill their purpose and building up the kingdom of God. And I am so pleased, so honored today to be chatting with none other than America's number one entrepreneur professor, Professor Devin Robinson. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's quite an honor to be here with you today.
Yes, thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be here. And you are the CEO and program director of the Urban Business Institute. You've helped entrepreneurs, that is over 125 Black-owned brick and mortar businesses, with a number growing each month, and collectively generating over 15 million US dollars in revenue in and for urban communities. Now, I have to hear your story. You know, listening and they say, well, just like what I did, he has a Caribbean accent. So I would love to, I would love to hear your story. You were born and raised in St. Thomas, U.S. Virgin Islands. So tell us about Devin Robinson. Before we get to Professor Devin Robinson, who is Devin Robinson?
Yeah, I was born on St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, as you said. I'm the youngest of four children. Um, Grew up in an interesting time in the 70s and in an interesting family. I wouldn't trade it in for the world. You know, my experience as a child growing up. Have family sprinkled in many different places. My father's side of the family is from the British Virgin Islands. And my mother's side, well, her parents are also from the British Virgin Islands, but she's from the US Virgin Islands. So I have dual citizenship in the British Virgin Islands and the US. Um, and then I have family sprinkled all throughout the US, from Florida to Chicago to New York to California, you name it. So growing up, um, I was, spent majority of my formative years in St. Thomas growing up, but there would be some summers and spring breaks and Christmas breaks that I would, um, visit and travel abroad to different family members. So that's kind of like my backstory growing up.
That sounds good. So at what point then would you have left St. Thomas to go to the US?
Yeah. So what happened with me? I graduated at the age of 17. So the thing with me with in school, from the beginning of my, get hearing the history of myself growing up, before I knew myself, my mother would tell me that I learned how to read. I knew how to read by the time I was 3 years old. I was a very quick learner.
Mm.
Um, because I had older siblings. So she said I would always be meddling in their work and what they're doing. And I was, very, I guess, nosy when it came to them. So I would catch on to a lot of things.
Mm.
So from kindergarten straight up, I was pretty much a straight A student. The times that I didn't is because I didn't try or I didn't care.
Mm.
Um, but I did have um, social difficulties just growing up in the environment that I grew up in. You're seeing people using and dealing drugs, and when I tell people we literally heard gunshots every night, they think it's an exaggeration, but it is
Mm.
not. There were gunshots every single night in my neighborhood, whether it was a gunfight or people just felt like shooting, bullets in the air. There was just gunshots every night, and this was the environment that I came up in, and it made me socially rough around the edges. So I would be getting into mischief, whether it's, most of the time I'm defending myself, right? Most of the time it's people that are trying to be bullies, or I'm intervening when someone's getting bullied. That's
Mm.
kind of like the spirit I had. And so I would have those types of challenges. And when I got through to high school, by the time of by 11th and 12th grade, I was facing criminal charges for different things, for assault and battery, and just the different social difficulties that I had in the streets of the Virgin Islands. The interesting part of me that I guess is also sort of an enigma is, I would be out on the weekends, hanging with the wrong crowd, getting to stuff. I've been arrested 6 times as a teenager.
Wow.
And, I would get out of jail on the weekend and head back into school on Monday and take an exam and get an A, with no
Wow.
problem. That was kind of like how I was. So my grades didn't suffer, even though my social aptitude suffered. Um, so by 12th grade, I think I was several months away from graduation. I was expelled. And the thing is, it was such an interesting story or interesting situation because, I was dating. This is the kind of young stuff that I'm just flipping back to my memory, right? So this is one of the times that I got arrested. I was dating this female in a neighborhood that the guys didn't like me coming in there. I guess the guys liked her, but she didn't like them. She liked me, and I was from a different neighborhood. So I would tell my mother because I used to drive her car and she had really dark tinted windows. And if I'm talking too much, tell me speed up on the
No, that's
story.
fine. That's
Um,
that's fine.
but she had really dark windows. So I would tell her that every time I go in there, these guys are like, giving me a little trouble, but I'm not worried. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not afraid. But one of those times I was going to pick her up and my mother was like, no, I'll go. And I'm like, well, I'm not gonna let you go by yourself. I'll go with you. My mother was a police officer. She's a retired police officer. Go
Oh,
figure,
wow.
right?
Okay.
So
That was
I'm riding with
interesting.
her. Very interesting. So I'm riding with her into the neighborhood, and the guys thought it was me. Obviously, to try to block off the street. Um, but she just kept going. We picked up my girlfriend, and on the way out, they really blocked off the street and had sticks and stuff. So I told her, I said, you see, I'm telling you, these guys are out for me. I'm not causing the trouble. Because a lot of times she would think I was the one that was causing trouble. And I was trying to tell
Mm.
her, not this time. So she rolled down the window because obviously she's a police officer. She's not afraid either. And she was like, yo, what's wrong with you guys? Like, why are you trying to bother my son? And those guys, I thought they would back off after they saw it was my mother, and they did not. So they were like, got aggressive. They like took bats and was like shoving it through the window after my mother. And you can think any teenage son is not letting that happen, right? So
Right.
I try to jump out of the car like to go at him, and she's grabbing me and she's like, "Can't you see it's like 6 of them?" And I'm like, I don't care. We going at it. Whatever happens, happens. But we gonna deal with this here right now in these streets.
Wow.
And I think neighbors called the cops or something, but the cops wound up showing up. So the cops came, and this story's going somewhere. So the cops came and they try to get it squashed or whatever. And I'm standing there like, because these guys, some of them go to my school, and I'm like, in school, they don't have nothing to say in school. Like, these guys are quiet guys in school, but all of a sudden they're tough guys, right? So I'm upset at this point. So I'm like, look, I'm just like standing there like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna just wait till I get back to school. And the cops, simmered it down and we left. And it was the whole weekend. It was a long weekend. I remember it was February or March. And you know, I called all my friends and I'm like, look, this is what happened, and this was gonna happen when we go back to school. And she was like, she didn't know I called my friends, but over the weekend, my mother kept saying, just go to the principal's office, report it, do not do anything to those guys, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, but I'm not listening to her, right?
Mm.
So the Monday came, or I think it was Tuesday, I think it was a long holiday. And I went to school. All my friends rode with us. And my mother, the last thing she said when I got out the car, because she dropped me off. I remember she didn't want me to drive. She dropped me off and she said, remember what I told you, go to the principal's office. So I'm like, all right. So I told my friend, I said, look, I have to go to the principal's office. Like she told me. So I have to go tell the principal. But we're going to handle business anyway. So I went to the principal's office. And as I opened the door, the principal was standing there. I said, hey, I need to tell you something. And she was like, I don't want to hear it, whatever it is. You're always into some type of trouble. I don't want to hear anything from you this morning. Just get out of my office.
Wow.
So 17-year-old guy, I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. I leave. So I left. And we went upstairs and we just waited for those guys. And when they came up, I didn't even say 2 words to them. I just attacked. And it turned into a big brawl. They started running. They tried to run to the office for shelter, to the cops, and we just took them out. And while we're taking them out, the cops came to the school and arrested all of us. So now we're charged with aggravated assault. I got expelled from school, the whole nine. What happened? I was out of school for a while, but they started to petition to get me back into school. Other teachers who knew I had good grades, my parents, we have to go to the superintendents, that kind of stuff. And I wound up getting back in on that technicality that I did go to the office and attempt to report it, and the principal kicked me out.
Wow.
So because of that, they had to accept me back into the school. And when I got accepted back into the school, they were like, we're not giving him any makeup work. Whatever grades he has, he has to stand with it. And ironically, I got back to school like 6 weeks before the end of the school year, and my grades dropped. My average was like, I don't know, like a 96 or something, they said. And I graduated with like a 77. So I still graduated.
That's good.
The problem was I still faced the criminal charge of aggravated assault, and I had 2 other felonies I was facing as well. So there was this deal that my lawyer constructed with the courts, and he asked the courts if I can join the military rather than facing these charges, even though I'm only 17, but I graduated high school. And he made his case, and the lawyer and the judge allowed me the opportunity to think it over and make the decision. Fast forward a week later, I ultimately made the decision to join the military. They escorted me straight to the recruiter's office. I had to sign up there on the spot. And that's how I wound up in the mainland of the United States.
Oh my
In the
goodness.
military is what got me there.
Oh my
So that's the story
Well,
of what happened.
I was going to ask you how you wound up spending 2 terms in the military. So that's really one story. So at what point?
Yeah, I had a minimum time I had to serve in the military. And I couldn't come back until that time was up.
Okay. And what did that do for you?
I will tell you, back then I hated it. I did not like the military. I was too rough around the edges for rules and structure. But in hindsight, the military saved my life because I was involved in so many things in the streets that, as I look back, death or prison was close behind. And the military gave me a better sense of manhood, responsibility, and it gave me something to look forward to. When you start talking about, I started learning, seeing the results of performance, setting goals and achieving them. It took a while. I mean, I was in there for some years before I really started to abide. I mean, I was constantly I was losing rank because of social stuff. Like it took a couple of years. But when I started to I need to get it together, I really look back and I say, it saved my life.
Wow.
So then by the time I came out, I had a family. I had 2 kids. I had a wife and 2 kids, and I have 3 now, 3 sons. But I had 2, and by then I had enough sense of self, enough self-awareness, to just make better decisions. Not get into anything that would really affect my life or my future. Right. So from there, I think my life started to, take
Get
an
back
uptick.
On track.
Yeah.
Do you remember at what point you got saved? Can you share your salvation story with us?
This was as a kid. I was really young. I grew up in, well, I won't say grew up. I was maybe about, I don't know, my formative years, somewhere around there, when my mother became a Christian. My grandmother always was. She would drag all of us to church, even when my mother and my dad was still in the streets partying. But I learned, like, the belief in God and, prayer, that kind of stuff at a young age. So even when I was going through that kind of stuff, I had already said, like, okay, I want to go to heaven and commit my life to God. But I think I was so young that I didn't quite shoulder that responsibility. So I still was wayward, but I mean, really, to really look back, I feel like I was protected. I felt like the things that I was involved in, and to come out of it unscathed, um, with no felony convictions, and pretty much all my entire circle. Like, I have very few friends. When I graduated high school, I was voted most popular and most devious. Go figure. Um, but I had so many friends, and I knew so many people. I mean, I had a lot of friends. And now today, I only have a handful. Many of them are in prison, serving long sentences, some life sentences, and I have many of them that are dead. The thing that has given me the awareness is, like, when I when you if you were to look at those individuals that are in prison or died or got murdered, you would see me. Like, we were of the same cloth. I made the
Yes.
same decisions they were making. I was doing the same things they were doing, but I wasn't getting caught up. So I don't know if I don't think that's just like instinctual decision making I had,
Yeah.
more so than I really had prayer covering me. And I think I did have this spirit of of God in me that also helped me chart the right decisions.
So at
So
what
that's I think, and I still live on a life of prayer and still, the whole nine. So I think I just remain covered.
Amen. At what point then did you enter into business to now lead you to become America's #1 entrepreneur professor? And how do you see how did you see God in that whole experience?
I am a praying man, and tithing and church to this day. Even in my work, even in the years that I would come home 5, 6 o'clock in the morning from the club, I'm going to church or tithing or something. It's like I kept that very close to me, even though the worldly temptations were there. But getting into business also in itself was very interesting, because I I after the military, I worked for I actually went to work, like, for corporate America.
Yes.
And working at corporate America, I just felt, well, if we're talking business, if I really have to be honest, I think I have to go back a little bit, because my first business venture was in the military. I owned vending machines when I was in the military. I think the spirit of entrepreneurship was always close by in my system, but I didn't quite know how to really carry it out. Like many entrepreneurs today, it is like you have this desire and this hope and this raw zest for entrepreneurship, but you don't know how to carry it out. And so I worked corporate America as a network engineer, using the training that I got in the military. And when I got out, I mean, when I was in the military, I mean, I got stories for days, right? So that's a whole other story. The company I was working for went through some challenges, and I just decided that I think I need to take control of my life and go into entrepreneurship. So I resigned from the company, and I went into full-time entrepreneurship in the year 2004. And I've been a full-time entrepreneur ever since. Um, what happened with me, I ran into a bunch of challenges, even with entrepreneurship, lost money, lost friends, because I'm shifting the way I'm living. The culture of who I am is not the same.
Right.
So it's not appealing to the people I was around before.
Mm.
So it was a lot of difficult times, I would say, from 2003-ish, because that's when it really started to hit me that I needed to get into business. So shifting the way I was living,
Right.
stopped going to the clubs, got closer to my spirituality, relationship with God, um, started to spend money differently. I learned the concept that the frugal controls the frivolous. The frivolous will go to the frugal for the loans and for the products, while the frugal will be investing and reproducing their resources. And that's the type of shift that I had, and the mindset that I took on. So
Mm.
it was a time of purge, where I'm purging my own habits, purging the circle around me. And that's why I say to this day, I only have a handful of people that I actually call friends now. Um, but going into business was very, very difficult. So when I was able to really find success in business, which, you know, for me, I took the slow road because there was no real organization there to help you. So I organically did this thing. Like, I really didn't find strong, stable success in business until about 2012 or so. I would even give it
Okay.
2013. So that's almost 10 years it took for me to really started to harvest and get the grasp of entrepreneurship in a way that I could hire people and they have medical benefits, life
Mm.
insurance, and paid time off, and they're actually working, and tuition reimbursement. And those are the type of things that my employees have throughout my businesses. But to get to that point was a slow process. And why I say it's slow, because there was no organization really there to help me. So
Ah.
when I started to really find that success, I said, I don't think that this is fair for the average entrepreneur that has that raw zest, but no resources, structure, or the know-how to take 10 years like I did. So that's why I founded my organization that began to train people, and not just give them theoretical training, because you can go to college if that's what you want. If you just want theory,
Right.
go to college. But with us, it's practical, right? So I have actual businesses, like in my organization, they get training, so they're in classroom, and it's almost reality based. The textbooks are my books. um and what I do with the entrepreneurship is I connect them to community, what we should be doing with our profits, how we should spend it properly so we don't have cyclical income, how
Right.
we build our wealth, how we expand other businesses, right?
So,
This is the type of stuff that I teach. And then they go to work in my live businesses as part of their curriculum. So we
ah,
watch them execute
right.
on the things they learned in the classroom. So that's what makes my organization different. And then 3 years ago, I went back to school and got certified as a business loan broker. So then I brought that to the school, and now we actually provide loans for the students, because that is also a challenge. So we provide the funding for them to actually start their business venture. So that's kind of how I
That's
started
amazing.
the organization. Yeah.
That's amazing. So you've grown from you've gone from where you were to where you are now. And when you look back, um, I'm sure you're giving thanks for where God has
Every day,
taken you. What
every day.
message just to somebody who is listening, and maybe they have a wayward son or daughter who would have been getting in trouble the way you would have, or maybe they're listening and they're the wayward son or daughter. What would you say to
Yeah.
a person who probably is not feeling any hope for the future right now?
Here's the key thing that I would say to them. Your vision does not need an endorsement.
Mm.
Once God endorses your vision, you don't need a social endorsement. And I think that's what causes a lot of the difficulties with us trying to get to the next level. Because what you got to understand is, we were born into an environment, right? And we came into this environment, and whatever that environment is, and I tell people, what happens with a lot of people is who get to them first stays with them last. So it's in psychology, right? They talk about your formative years and the attachment theory of when you're really young and developing your personalities and developing who you are. And what happens is sometimes you come into this environment and something's inside telling you that you should be greater than this, or you should be more than this, but you don't know how to get there because there are other things that are preventing you to break that barrier. And one of it heavily is the pressure, right? The peer pressure, the social pressure of you shifting from who you are to what you know or to who you know you should be.
Right.
And that right there is a major stronghold on many people in the community because you know, if it's like the crab in a barrel. I mean, that sounds cliche, but it's really true. If you start to seem like you're expanding, then we start hearing the criticism, or you think you better than, or who do you think you are? And because of our emotional attachment to everything we've learned from our parents and our cousins and our siblings and our friends, we retract and we shrink back down into that place of where the criticism is coming from.
Amen.
So the level of where it is, if we get too big, that criticism makes us come back. And we keep shrinking, right? And the next thing we turn around, we're 50, 60 years old, and then regret starts to sink in, right? Because in psychology, it says that when you're older, you go into two places. It's regret or pride of your life, right? And to avoid that regret, you have to shift. So I talk about this in my training, and I don't want to get too long-winded, but it's to kind of like hone in on the points that I'm making.
That's fine.
There
I
are
have
people.
about 3 minutes left.
Oh, wow. Okay. There are people who give you things at every level. So you have a humorous friend, the counselor, the confidant at this level. When you go to the next level, there are other people who are humorous, counselors, and confidants. That's right. But we're so afraid of losing the ones at this level that we don't go to the other level, because when we think when we go to the other levels, we're going to be lonely. But you have to know that there are people at every level. There's a great loyal employee at minimum wage, and there's one at $1 million. Yeah. And then there's the thief at minimum wage, and there's one at $1 million salary.
Right.
So that's the stronghold we have to learn to break, that peer pressure, in order to get to the level that we're trying to get to.
That's great. Oh my goodness. I feel like I have more questions I really could ask you, but I just want to end with this second to last question. What is one major lesson that you've learned in your life? One valuable lesson that you can share with us, being America's #1 entrepreneur professor, in getting to that level? What's a lesson?
You have to conquer self. Like Plato said, the biggest battle is to conquer self. When you conquer self, no one else can conquer you. And that is you breaking fear. Fear cripples us, okay? And I taught college economics for 8 years. That's where they got the professor thing from. And that's why I was able to create an institute that mimics a college but has other factors to it. And in the classroom, I would teach my college students working on bachelor's the importance of being fearless and going as far as you think your potential can take you. Don't just get the bachelor's because you're trying to get a promotion or make more money. It should be bigger than that. It should be beyond that. It should be because you're trying to become a certain level of a human being. And breaking fear and not worrying about the criticism and the distractions is the key to getting you to those places. And by the time you look around, you're going to see how blessed you are. And that should be motivation for you to keep on moving.
Amen to that. How can people connect with you, Professor Devin Robinson?
Yeah, they can go to urbanbusinessinstitute.com. That's my organization, urbanbusinessinstitute.com. Or they can go to my website, devinrobinson.com. That's with an I, DEVIN, robinson.com. My books are there, and you can get access to, all my other businesses and ventures from that website.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Devin Robinson, America's #1 entrepreneur professor, and of course, CEO and program director of, as you said, Urban Business Institute, training entrepreneurs from the inception of the business idea to the establishment of a physical location. Of course, you've helped over 125 Black-owned brick and mortar businesses, with the number growing each month. and generating over 15 million in revenue in and for urban communities. You have a very rich testimony from a young boy in St. Thomas, US Virgin Islands, there to being where you are now. And we say thank you for sharing your story with us on Kingdom Shakers.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
God bless you.
Same to you.